Hi everybody. So I wanted to make a video to talk about what we learned recently about our Coleman propane lanterns. So we have, I think, 5 of these lanterns, and most of them were pretty dim. We had some that were brighter than others, and did some different experiments, and ultimately found that cleaning the orifice for the fuel line is what made the biggest difference. So I just wanted to show you how to disassemble one of these, a few things I've learned along the way, how to clean that orifice and put it back together. It's actually pretty simple. So tools, Phillips head screwdriver, let's see what size this turned out to be, a 7/32 socket. That's actually for the orifice itself. And a pair of pliers or channel locks. And then I am going to clean it. I'll use some acetone. You could probably use any type of solvent. I found acetone worked well. Actually, not even sure if you need to use the solvent. I can also pick it out with I used the tip of a screw that almost had like a little wire burr on it. But you can try to find a little fine piece of wire or anything just to clean it out. And I'll show you that when we get to that point. And so I did use just a finer pair of pliers to hold that. And this particular lantern also has a mantle that has been broken, so we'll replace that while we're there. So Collins, give a close-up of this. You can see the mantles are a Coleman number 95. So if we ever run out of those, you can just get the Coleman number 95, and that's the replacement for this lantern. So let me actually show you close-up, Kyle, if we can get close-up here. So the tiny tube that goes up is actually where the propane goes through the valve, and the larger tube is the air intake, and the small tube is the propane intake, and they mix up top, and the flame actually comes down from the top of this. So the orifice is actually at the top of the small tube. And so what we're trying to do is just get to that, and you'll see when we get it all apart how we get to that, and again, we'll clean that out. So with that, we'll get started. So you take off the top thumb screw. Now these pieces all come apart separately, but there's a way when you take this handle, this wire handle, you can actually hook it into this metal frame, and we'll do that when we put it back together. And when that's the situation, you can actually pull all this off together. So for now, we'll take it apart. So you take the top piece out. Careful working with obviously the glass globe, the metal frame. If the mantle, so this piece, if that's still connected, just work very carefully around it. Obviously this one's disconnected, so we'll put a new one on, but that will be trash. Okay, so once we have that part taken apart, next step is Phillips head screwdriver in the valve. So just a screw right in the center. That screw comes all the way apart. And at that point, the handle can just pull right out. So the handle disconnects. The next step is, oh, I forgot to mention a tool, one of the tools. So a 3/8 inch wrench. I like using the box end for this location. So you can see the screw right in the center. So we just need to take that all the way out. That connects the upper part actually down into that valve body. What I found is on each of these, that screw's been fairly tight, almost like there's a little bit of corrosion or something, but work that all the way out. Okay, so that screw, then you can take it all the way out. Now the two parts will separate, and so the thing you want to be careful of is the igniter. So this wire loop with the ceramic base right here, be careful not to damage it. And so the idea here is you really just need to get to the tip of this fuel line. And so you can work them apart a little bit. I haven't actually found a way. I can get this all the way off, Again, be careful with the igniter, not to damage it. This piece can come all the way off, and I have not been able to figure out with the valve how to get these two pieces disconnected, but you really don't need to. So at this point, again, the very tip has the orifice for the fuel, and so just take a pair of pliers or channel locks. I imagine that's a pretty thin tube, so you don't need to grab it very hard. You just don't want it to spin inside the valve. So just hold that, and again, the 7/32 socket right onto the orifice, and that'll just unscrew right out. They have not been super tight. And if you hold the orifice up to the light, you can see a very tiny hole. This one actually I can't see anything through right now. Probably, I know you can't see that in the camera. But that's really what we're trying to clean out. So that's been the restriction in each of the first three I've done. So I'm fairly certain it's going to be the common way to fix each one of these. So again, small piece of wire. I found a screw that has a tiny burr on it, which is I think kind of unusual to find that, but I couldn't find a piece of wire actually small enough to get through that orifice. So this worked out nicely. So you really just want to clean out. I think what happens and why these get plugged is propane, which is what these run on. Obviously, not obviously, but obviously they run on propane, but propane sometimes has some heavy oils in it that don't get separated. I think it's part of the refining process, and this is my guess is what's happening is just those heavy oils sometimes just get carried through with the fuel. They get on that orifice, and just as hot as the lantern is, I don't know if chemically they actually cook, but they make some ash, and that leads to significant restriction. So again, I'm using a little acetone. I'm not sure if that's required or if what I just did with the wire may be sufficient, but I figured since I have it apart, you could probably use any kind of solvent. Nail polish removers used to use acetone, so if you don't have anything else, you can get some of the older nail polish remover. I think anymore they don't use the ones with acetone, but maybe you can still find it. And I just soaked it in there for 15-20 seconds. Didn't have to do a whole lot. And again, this really just came from the experience I had with the first few doing them. It worked out really nice. And so if that loosened up anything more, again, I use this screwed. I can feel it going into the orifice. And now I can easily see through the hole. Actually, on the first few I did, I could see through the orifice fine, so I didn't think anything was wrong. But I went ahead and did this procedure anyway, just thinking, well, I got it apart. And after I had it all together, it made a huge difference. So it was just one of the experiments I was doing, and it turned out to be the one that had the biggest effect. So you may not think you're doing anything, but when you actually light it, you'll see a big difference. So that's really as simple as that. What I'll do is put this back together. So again, the orifice back in the same place. Doesn't have to be very tight on the top. I just, finger tight with this socket, so it's not super tight. And then reverse the step. So I'm holding this in position, carefully putting this back together. Again, the fuel tube needs to line up with the air tube. And as I mentioned before, just be careful of the igniter. You have to kind of thread that up and through there. And when you put it back together, make sure that the fuel line goes in the hole where the air line comes together. And then once that's in place, take the screw, it goes back in the center. 3/8 wrench. Okay, so now once that 3/8 screws back in, now to put the handle for the fuel valve back together, look at this carefully. When you put it back together, you'll notice, I'll try to point this out, hopefully we can see it on the video. Right on the center where the shaft is going to go in, there's a small notch. I'm sure we can't see here, but you'll notice it when you look inside that fuel line. There's a little notch, and that'll line up with a little tab that's on the valve shaft piece right here. Again, probably difficult to see, but just note that. So when you're putting it back together, make sure you get those lined up, and they line up, go back together, and you'll feel it engage. And then the Phillips head screw back in the middle. Now, while we have this apart, I'm going to show you how to put a mantle on. So this is the part that I learned about. I didn't know this until I started doing some troubleshooting with these and learning about them. It's actually pretty interesting. So this is called a mantle, and these lanterns are actually incandescent lantern. And what that means is the material gives off light at temperature. So the traditional style light bulbs, incandescent bulbs, it's actually the filament in there getting up to temperature is what gives off light. This is on the same type of principle. There's some very, metal oxides that are created when this mantle is burned, and some people talk about it almost like suspended ash when it's in place. And it's not actually the flame itself coming from the propane that's giving off the light. The flame is heating the mantle, and the mantle, then being an incandescent material, will give off the light. So that's why we had low light, is because we had low temperature. And the reason we had low temperature is because we had a low flow of propane to the burner. While this is apart, I should have mentioned this as well. You can take a look at the screen at the very top. I found that all of them have been cleaned so far, but some people have talked about needing to clean that also to get maximum flow. But these all look pretty good. I didn't even bother wire brushing them or anything. So the way these get put on, it's supposed to be just top and bottom. These tabs is connected to a wire, and you get them around this section, and then you just pull this plastic piece off. I haven't found that plastic piece, to be honest with you, to be very useful. It's almost like it comes off, and then I just take the wire directly and make sure it's worked around there nicely. So again, top and bottom, flip it over there. Now, this is, like I said, people talk about to make these pretty rugged. Not that they're ever really rugged. From what I read, a lot of people have problems with them breaking with handling. They spend some time making sure it's not twisted, top to bottom, and that things line up pretty decent. And then you burn this. So this is the pre-burn. What we'll do now is I'll take it outside. The fumes that come off of this are definitely not healthy, so burn it in a well-ventilated place and don't get your nose in the way of the fumes. So just take a match and let it burn at the bottom. It'll burn all the way up, and let that sit for a few minutes till it burns out and it's all done. And then I'll come back and we'll show you how to put this part together. And I was talking earlier about how the handle can integrate with everything, so it all goes on as one piece. So I'll show you that as well. Okay, so I'll burn this now. We'll be right back. Okay, so here it is outside. Again, well ventilated place, and we're just going to light this mantle. And I think my understanding is this is actually when these metal oxides are getting created as this burns. And you end up with just a white tower of ash. burns in just about a minute, but you'll see some of the smoke coming off for maybe a few minutes. So I usually just, if you're outside, if you're camping, you can just put the globe right back on once the major part of the smoking stopped. Some people talk about really even once you've done that burn for the next 30 minutes when it's lit, it'll continue to form the best ash. Okay, so we'll come back inside and I'll show you how to put everything back together. Okay, so had all the pieces we took apart individually, and I wanted to show you when you put it back together. If you put it back together, these can all be put together as one assembly, so you can deal with it together instead of the individual pieces, which I think is a better way to do it. Probably less chance of things breaking the next time it comes apart. So if you start with the cage, put the globe in the cage, and notice the top of the cage has the loops in the wire. If you line those loops up with the holes in this cap, then when the handle goes on, it'll go through both of them. There it's in both of them. Now this whole assembly works together. So we just put that whole thing back together as one piece, and the next time you take it apart, you take the top screw off and this whole piece comes apart together. So that's that part. Okay, so here is the assembly with the new mantle on it. One thing I did want to point out here is for good igniting, one thing you can also do is make sure that the position of the igniter is fairly close to the mantle. Because what's going to happen when you turn the valve, gas valve on, the gas is going to go down on the inside of the mantle, and so when you turn the handle fully, the igniter will spark. And so having that fairly close to the mantle will help make it easier for getting good lighting. So with that, here was this assembly. Like I said, this whole piece can just go right on top of this together. Just make sure that the wire frame all sits inside the cast base. And once you reach that point, you'll feel it all come together nicely. And then just put the screw back on top. That's it, it's all done. So hopefully this one will react just like the previous three, which all showed dramatic improvement in the light output after that orifice was cleaned out. So, okay, so here we are outside with the lantern we just worked on. I'm going to turn it on, turn that handle. You can see it came right on. I did want to point out, this thing's so bright it's almost tough to tell, but when you look at them, if the mantle is brighter up top than down bottom, that can be an indication that you're not getting full gas flow. What I noticed on the ones that were dim is they'd be really bright up top and the lower third or 2/3 were pretty dull. So this was a good indication that now that you see the whole thing being fairly uniformly lit, that the lantern's getting full power. So, okay, so that's it. Good luck. Hope it all works out.